we forget about scrubs because it's just always there. You're always going to put something on. You're not going to go in your house clothes, right? You're not going to wear, sweatpants and gown up. So I think we forget about that. It's important to know that scrubs is your first line of defense, basically, right? You don't want to bring home stuff. You don't want to catch stuff from work. You don't want to get stuff on you. So it's absolutely the first line of defense.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing the industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now, turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
On this episode of Beyond Clean, we are going to be speaking with Afif Ashik, Regional Director of Operations at Crothall. We're going to be talking about scrubs. And Hank, I don't know if you got this idea from all the very heated posts, I would say, on vendor scrubs on social media. It seems like about a month before we recorded this, LinkedIn went bananas.
I was sitting there, Justin, actually thinking about this season, and I definitely remember those posts. They did get a little bit crazy out there. But I was also just thinking about, hey, what classifies as PPE? What are those things we definitely need to cover if we're going to do a whole season on PPE? And scrubs is one of those where I started thinking, there's not a lot of conversation about them, and definitely not in this context. So I thought it was very important to add this to the season, to dive into the topic and talk about some of the nuances, not just how it functions as PPE, but, what are the logistics around scrubs? How do they work? How do we get them? When should we wear them? All those kinds of questions. So it's going to be a really good, broad episode today to dive into a lot of those areas.
All right. Well, we're not going anywhere, and neither should you. We'll be right back after a short break with Afif Ashik, Regional Director of Operations at Crothall. I'm Justin Poulin.
And I'm Hank Balch.
From 17 Studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
We are speaking today with Afif Ashik, Regional Director of Operations at Crothall. And amazingly, we've talked about attire before, but we've really never talked about scrubs. And we are absolutely going to be talking about that today and PPE etiquette. So Afif, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm extremely excited. Seeing you guys in action. Love the work. Love the content. Just wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, why don't you talk some about your background? And before we even got on, you were talking about how you share the passion for all things SPD, and how did you get bitten by the bug? Why do you love it?
Well, I started off right out of high school, and I was working as an OR aide, basically transporting patients, supplies, and whatnot. Went into the surgical technology field. Graduated with a certificate, and, I started working and I started, doing procedures, but I always had issues with trays. Trays were incorrect. Always had, bio-burden or something on it. The count sheet was never right. And a couple of years went by and I was like, I got to go downstairs and take a look at what's going on. And yeah, that's where I got bit. That's where I was like, I got to do something. So I started kind of helping out SPD, and it just evolved. I took the certification class. At that time, I took the Nancy Chobin's certification class.
Oh, CBSPD.
CBSPD. But then I ended up transferring over to what is now HSPA. And I scrubbed for years. And then I started working at another facility, Valley Hospital in Jersey. And whilst working the cardiac, I was on the cardiac team. We were opening 10 trays to do a case. And at one point I was like, it took me an hour, 45 minutes to set up in the morning.
Wow.
I was like, this is
that's
insane.
a long time.
This is insane. So we ended up working with the surgeons and the cardiac team. And we were like, all right, let's fix this. So we ended up streamlining everything and went from 10 trays to 3 trays. And if we had to do a valve, we had an extra tray and cut the time from an hour and 45 minutes up to about 45 minutes. Then the peri-op VP was like, oh, I want you to do this for the whole OR. So she kind of pulled me off cardiac, and then I started doing that. So
that was the end. You were doing optimization from that point on.
That was it.
That's really great insight, though, for your role in operations, right? Because, just building those efficiencies, I mean, that's what it takes, is removing all that unnecessary effort that comes from lack of standardization and everything else. I mean, there's really no better project to work on to really understand, the inventory, the instruments themselves, how big the inventory is. Do you have enough? How common is one set to another? How can you create flexibility? I mean, if you want to dive into SPD, that's one of the best places to go. All right. So let's have a little fun. Let's get started with kind of I'll call this a softball, a nice underhanded, slow pitch softball. As we tee up scrubs, what's your favorite color of scrubs?
Navy blue. Navy blue.
Navy blue.
Yeah. The green is just, outdated. That OR green is just outdated. Navy blue. That's the way to go.
That's where it's at.
Some people like the burgundy because it covers up the blood,
Yeah. So when I started, I was kind of that powder blue, the Smurf. And then when I went down to San Antonio, actually was the first time that I ended up in green. So that was a nice change. But yeah, you're right. The burgundy was always what we aspired to. Yeah. So when we talk about scrubs, obviously this is going to be a season about PPE. And, scrubs is not always even on the list, and definitely not on the top of the list when you talk about the topic of personal protective equipment. We almost always jump into the masks, the gowns, the gloves, the shoe covers. And I really thought it was important, for this season to take a step back and say, okay, yeah, but before we even get to all that, there's one other very important piece of the puzzle, especially for departments like ours. So before we get into that, why do you think that is? Like, why do folks just kind of skip over scrubs? And maybe more importantly for this interview, why are scrubs kind of that foundational piece of attire when it comes to protecting ourselves?
That's a good question. We forget about scrubs because it's just always there. You're always going to put something on. You're not going to go in your house clothes, right? You're not going to wear, sweatpants and gown up. So I think we forget about that. But, it's important to know that scrubs is your first line of defense, basically, right? You don't want to bring home stuff. You don't want to catch stuff from work. You don't want to get stuff on you. So it's absolutely the first line of defense.
So in talking about not bringing things in and out, one of the kind of shocking things if you're first getting into healthcare is like you probably drive by, if you live in like a large city or something, like you drive by those stores that sell scrubs and you can see, like, we're talking about, what's your favorite color, but those stores, you can get designs and you can get, thin cuts to make you look real sharp. And then we end up in sterile processing, and we may talk about sizes here in a second, but that ain't the options that you're given. So what's the difference in like our scrubs that we see in sterile processing in that hospital setting, and then maybe some other folks that we see coming in and out of even the hospital who are actually wearing those scrubs in and out?
I have an issue with those. There's studies out there, there's a bunch of studies out there that show that scrubs can carry pathogens around, and you can bring them inside your house. You can transfer them from facility to facility, especially like methicillin resistant stuff. So it's a problem for me. It's a pain point for me. I do not like, if you're in healthcare, you shouldn't be bringing home scrubs. That's just my opinion. There's no reason to. Leave it at work. If the hospital is providing you with scrubs, there's no reason why you should bring it home. You're just compromising your health, your family's health. I mean, look at COVID. What were we doing before coming into our house? I know people that lived in their basement so they wouldn't put any pathogens in their families upstairs, right? They would come home to the basement, they would shower, they would strip off. Imagine wearing scrubs from a facility back and forth. I mean, that's insane. It's just not something that should be done.
Yeah. So you're probably in the hospital setting, right? There's times when sterile processing will leave our departments, right? So now we're kind of getting to this gray area because you're absolutely right. Like COVID changed the mindset of like where germs go. I remember the first week or two, when things were just like first going crazy and like everyone, like no one knew what's going on. And I'm outside like Lysoling my packages, before I bring them in from the post office. Cause I'm like, I know these things been through a million hands and like everything else and they ain't clean, but when it comes to scrubs, we're in decontam all the time in sterile processing with things going on and splashing around. And we're not completely covered in all of our other, gowns and gloves and everything else with scrubs. And then what happens when we leave decon and go somewhere else? Kind of walk us through that implication, if you will.
Yeah. There's a study done by the Ofsted group. You guys, know them, right? About airborne particles in decon and droplets. I mean, it was a great article. It was a great study. And it just shows that if you're wearing PPE and you're leaving decontam, you should still change your scrubs. You shouldn't be going from a dirty area to a clean area, let alone outside to the public areas where you have other patients and other family members and things like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking the cafeteria, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the main points where you're public. Everybody's there. You're touching everything. And again, even if you have the best hand hygiene, you saw the droplet study, I'm sure. The person's back, even though their back was never towards the sink area, they still had droplets. They still had little micro droplets. So I think it's important that people create a workflow that allows for people to change and their staff to change prior to leaving decon. In some of our places that we manage, we have a locker room right attached to decontam. So they can go into the locker room, change into a new set of scrubs. Or if they're in decon for the day, at their break, they change into their street clothes. They go outside, they have a cigarette if they smoke, or they go get lunch outside, but they still change. And I think that should be common practice.
It's cold in the healthcare environment a lot of times for many people because that's just part of minimizing the spread of infection, right? So that's all part of the science behind why we do that. But sometimes people are pretty cold. I'm not sure if people get too cold in decon when they're working their tails off, but in other areas, it gets a little cold. Is it okay to wear like long sleeves underneath? Like a lot of people have those long t-shirts that they wear under their scrubs because for that reason, they get cold.
Yeah, that's a sore topic. Not a lot of people, there's studies saying you can, there's studies saying you can't. My suggestion would be, your facility should have warm-up jackets, usually laundered. Same like scrubs, you can get them right from the scrub machine. Or they have disposable versions. But, I don't think you should wear them because, again, they're not laundered at the facility. They're laundered at your house, and you still have to bring that back home. So I don't think it's a great idea. But again, you could find studies that say you can and you can't. I wouldn't. Wear a warm-up jacket. That would be the best way to do it.
So now I want to talk about vendors and vendor scrubs because there's posts all over social media on this topic. It's an added cost for vendors. Sometimes they get pretty riled up about the scrubs model. In some cases, they're paying $8 to $10 a set with a $100 sign up fee. And so you can understand to some extent the vendors have some reluctance to wear these, disposable vendor scrubs, although not all the systems are disposable. Some are reusable scrubs. But essentially, those systems are set up to prevent vendors from coming into your facility and then going to another one. I think I already know your answer to this, but should we be concerned about these reps that are wearing their company branded scrubs going from supporting a case at ABC Hospital at one side of town and XYZ at the other side?
Funny story is that some of my counterparts that report to me asked, "Oh, can we get company scrubs? It would look better for us, right?" And I said, that's not a great idea so my counterparts, they go from facility to facility because we do checks on our facilities. And I said, it's not a great idea because we go to facility to facility. And although we might be doing rounds and we might not necessarily spend a significant amount of time in decon, maybe 15, 20 minutes inspection, we're still in decon, which means we're still going to be susceptible to droplets. We're still going to have to bring that home with us. We're still going to have to launder it. And how do you protect yourself, your family, and other patients, right? So my answer is vendors should also not go from facility to facility with their own scrubs. A lot of times at most of our facilities, we make them just use a jumpsuit. The bunny suit, the jumpsuit, they usually use a different color hat or bouffant cover, and they wear shoe covers. So saves them from having to sign up with like ScrubX or, vendor.
Get Rep Scrubs, vendor made. There's a couple of them out there, yeah. I remember as a sterile processing director, I would go out like Wednesdays after work to this one Mexican food restaurant, and I would always see a couple of my ortho reps and an ortho surgeon there with our hospital green scrubs, had the hospital name on them, and they're sitting there, drinking margaritas. And I'm thinking like, guys, you may be a doctor, but that's pretty dumb. And even, to your other point, even if they're not wearing them between different facilities, I know if it's a particular vendor that's supporting a hospital on a regular basis, sometimes they'll take home some of those scrubs and it's a new set of scrubs. It's the hospital set of scrubs, but they didn't get in the hospital. They walked through the parking garage and then into the hospital with these scrubs on. And so there's a whole kind of workaround in the industry that everyone kind of knows. But, if you see them walking down the hall or at the Starbucks or in the cafeteria, like we talked about, that's a pretty good dead giveaway that there's some non-compliance going on there. So I completely agree with you.
Listen, we could talk about scrubs forever right now. I mean, you even have people with scrub allergies, right? Not scrub allergies per se, but the detergent that they use. I know facilities that allow people to take a brand new set of scrubs so that they can wash them at home, and they're supposed to bring them back and wear them at the facility. But, they come with the scrubs on. And again, that's a terrible way to go about it. But there's a lot of things that haven't been addressed in the industry too, right? So there's how do we go from facility to facility if you're wearing scrubs, right? There's also, what do you do if you have an allergic reaction to the chemicals they use to clean scrubs, which are fairly harsh. I mean, they're harsh chemicals, right? And who's allowed to have scrubs in general at the facility level, right? And then you also have people wearing scrubs when they're outside, and it's really more for like, I'm important, I'm in healthcare, I'm wearing scrubs. People call you doctor, even though you're a tech somewhere, you know what I mean? It happens. Yeah. It happens. It's just the world we live in.
And honestly, you mentioned the studies that are out there around scrubs, and you also mentioned getting called doctor, and that made me think about those white lab coats, that many departments now are allowing, sterile processing. You see pharmacy wearing them sometimes, but that's a known carrier, for pathogens. So if you're not laundering that lab coat on a regular basis and it's just hanging out is your consistent overcoat, right? That's what you take outside to go smoke. That's what you wear to the cafeteria. To your point, that's not solving the problem. There's still a major gap there.
Absolutely. And
that needs to be addressed.
People still do it. They still wear their lab coats. I mean, I believe a couple of years ago, I think I saw a study on lab coats. They were horrendous, disgusting. People didn't launder them.
Going back to the rep question and then also to the question about, people just taking their scrubs home sometimes, it gets me into my next question, which is the scrub sizes. This is one of the most frustrating things as a technician or leader or anybody who works in a healthcare facility that you can't bring your own scrubs. You're at the mercy of the sizes that just happen to be available in your locker room on your shift. And let me tell you, you gotta be the perfect size to always have the right size scrubs. Cause if you're a common size or even like a very uncommon size, you're either squeezing in scrubs or you're swimming in scrubs. That can't be accomplishing the goal of preventing infection and cross-contamination if we're not even sized right in our scrubs. Do you have any insight on, how to manage this better than what we're doing today?
Well, funny story is I'm shaped like an ostrich, right?
Okay.
I'm heavy set on the top and I have those chicken legs and they're long on the bottom. So for me to fit into actual scrubs, I need like a triple XL pants and a double XL top. And that's only because of the length, right? So I always have that issue. And, I've kind of just said, I'll just do triple X for everything. So I look like a 1990s guy wearing Jinko jeans, I know you remember those, right?
That's the era I grew up in. I know all about that grunge factor.
Yeah. That's what I look
They should make them plaid.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, what I do at the facility level is, we work with the laundry and linen department and we kind of get a tally of who's in our department, what scrub sizes fit better for them. And we try to have that combination built into the scrub machines. Or, sometimes they're left on the shelf in the locker room and they have a par. So we try to have a combination. The first thing a person, when we do our hiring process, they fill out a uniform document, tells you what size they want. They have to sign for it too and say, I understand the uniform policy. I understand that we have to change between and we have to change, before going on break. So we try to mitigate it by doing everything ahead of time, proactively.
I hate how disorganized they get. That's why I do like the dispensing machines, because I would come in and I'm like you, I need a different size on the top than I do on the bottom for similar reasons. And mostly the fact that I have a bigger top. But you'd walk up to like the cart and, once there's not enough sizes, everybody just starts like flopping them all around. So there's like extra large in the small section. And then it's just a nightmare. I mean, just from an efficiency standpoint, I feel like the way that the par levels of scrubs in an open sort of rack or cart system is an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, especially if it's in a locker room with an open bathroom, right? You saw that study about flushing the toilet and the, wonderful particles getting on your toothbrush. Right. Well, it's the same thing with scrubs, right? If you have it in an open shelf in your locker room and there's an open bathroom there, this is going to be the same concept, really. I'm sure no one has tested it for that, but I'm sure you could, right? Everybody should just invest in scrub machines. I don't care which one. Just invest in a scrub machine, right? Protects them, keeps them organized.
And then, Justin, you have those situations where people on scrub day, the scrub delivery day, and then you go and you get the scrubs you're going to need for the week and you go hide them in your locker and that's where they go. That's why when second shift comes in or third shift comes in, then you got scrubs because they've already been squashed. So yeah, whatever's going on with this open rack system, I think everyone knows that ain't working,
No way. Scrub machine. That's the best way to go. Saves you money on scrubs, keeps them safe, keeps them protected. And it keeps everybody accounted for too, right? So they're not taking scrubs home because now they don't have the credits, right? They were making sure they put the stuff back. you can track and trend actually who's returning the scrubs. So if decon technicians are supposed to remove their scrubs at a certain point in time, you can track it because it's going to be in the scrub machine. So you can run reports on it, or you can have automatic reports sent to you.
So I've got one final question, Justin. You may have another one too, but we need a solution for pockets, right? So talking about cross-contamination here, how many times have you bent over in a pair of scrubs and everything in your pockets comes piling out on the dirty hospital floor? So this is like, your badge, your pins, your like whatever else you got in your pockets is just completely dumping on the floor. Have you ever come across anything that would actually solve that problem besides just not putting anything in your scrub pockets?
I'm going to go full nerd on you here, buddy.
Okay. Pocket protector.
I got two nerds. I'm like surrounded by nerds right now.
Pocket protectors, man.
Just because you have a beard doesn't mean you're not a nerd.
Exactly. Listen, that's how it is.
Okay, that's the solution. Okay.
Listen,
okay, I've never considered that.
Yeah, pocket protector. Plus benefit. Linen departments, they're always complaining about ink in the scrubs. So if you have pocket protectors, you're not going to get ink on the scrubs. They're going to save money on the scrubs, etc. So pocket protectors, or actually, they have the scrubs with the pocket on the side, like on the right hand or left hand side. You could always do something like that too. But again, that's an investment on the facility side, and you're going to have to get approvals for that, and you have to talk to the right people for that. So, but pocket protectors will probably be the easiest and the fastest way to do it.
All right. I love it. That's a closer right there. We're closing with pocket protectors. Afif, how can folks find you, connect with you, follow you on social media? I mean, we love it. It's our playground.
I'm on LinkedIn, Afif Ashik. You can connect through there. You can email me, afif.ashik@crothall.com, or you could just send me a text, 201-364-9729.
Awesome, Afif. Great job today. And, no matter what Hank says, just make sure he never tries to pull off just because I have a beard and a red hat on all the time, I'm not a nerd again.
No.
I'm calling you out at HSPA.
He's not a nerd, but he's a nerd. It's okay, right? Us nerds are winning. There's nothing wrong with it. It's okay.
He's a nerd parading around as a cool guy. I love it.
Why can't nerds be cool guys? Hold on, Justin. Why can't nerds be cool
exactly. That's what I think.
I consider myself pretty cool. I don't know. I could be wrong.
I consider myself pretty nerdy.
Nerds always consider themselves cool, guys. I have to give you a whole lesson on this. It starts with a beard.
That's why I have one. You see, that's why I always maintain a beard.
It's looking sharp. Yeah, I like that.
It's not crazy full because my wife, she doesn't like it super full, but she doesn't like when I shave it off either. So
right.
All right, Afif, thanks for coming on. Great job today.
Appreciate it, guys. Awesome work here. Love it.
All right, everybody, that was Afif Ashik, Regional Director of Operations at Crothall, talking about scrubs as personal protective attire and the etiquette around that. I don't know. That was a really great point, Hank, at the beginning. People just not looking at scrubs as PPE, and it certainly is. I remember, and I think I might have told this story on a prior show a few seasons ago, but I remember my first job leaving nursing and going into sales. The owner of the company was very focused on education. And one of the things he always said to us was, I would not wear the shoes into your house that you're out visiting SPD departments all day long in, especially if you've got young kids. And I just thought it was so interesting. I worked as a nurse for 20 years before I went in, or almost 20, maybe 15 before I moved, into a medical sales position. And nobody ever said to me, should leave your shoes at work. You shouldn't launder at home. And, the truth is, even just doing on floors, non-surgical, you just come into contact with so much bioorganic material that I do very firmly believe scrubs should stay at work and in the department.
It's a huge gap, and we still got a long way to go, as came up in this interview. There's a lot of confusion out there for, hey, if we got scrubs in the hospital and we did that compliantly, can we go to the cafeteria? Can we walk down the hall in between restricted areas? Can we come at a decontam without changing scrubs? Like everything that came up in the conversation today, those are the questions that are either being asked and answered in different ways, or sometimes they're not even being asked today. Then you go into topics that we didn't even cover, like, hey, can we make scrubs out of different material? Like I've heard of infused scrubs, I think with silver or copper, that has like antimicrobial properties. There's a lot of things like that's costly, right? There's a lot of things that we could do differently than we're doing today to up our scrub game. So I think we identified a lot of gaps, and hopefully we're inspiring some innovators out there to bring some solutions.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. But Hank, in your smooth, too cool for school way, take us on out of here, brother.
Well, you can listen to us anywhere podcasts are heard, but if you're cool like me, if you're not a nerd like Justin, you'll listen to us on the iTunes Beyond Clean app. Well, actually, the Apple app for your phone. You can listen to iTunes podcasts if you want to. If you're a nerd, which we do like the nerds out there too, you can listen to us on Android or anywhere podcasts are heard, Spotify, iHeartRadio, etc., etc. But if you do listen to us on any of those platforms or mobile apps, please leave us a rating and review, 5 stars, or it didn't happen. If you got an idea for a topic or guest, hit us up at info@beyondclean.net. And make sure, if you're listening to the podcast, that you're checking out the Beyond Clean events that we have almost monthly now, big global conferences. Check us out. And we got webinars happening a couple of times a month as well. You can find out all that info by following us on LinkedIn, through Facebook, or through the Beyond Clean website at beyondclean.net. And as we like to remind you each and every week, whatever you're doing, keep fighting dirty.